right now they're going through step by step how these agents got into position, got there that morning, went through the security checkpoints. I think that the government is also trying to establish the fact that they were doing things by the book. They weren't there to necessarily cause problems or cause chaos, but we're seeing the evolution of how eventually things got a little chaotic.
To your point about this occasionally perhaps feeling mundane, in fact, the judge overseeing this case, Judge Lynn Adelman, at one point interjected questioning to say it seemed to be getting repetitive, considering we'd heard testimony from previous agents already on that, and the government attorneys pointing back that in this case, the final person we heard from was the lead of the operation, so we kind of have to get his perspective as well. But you weren't the only one to note that, Julius.
Well, I assume that Judge Adelman, he's made a point that he wants this thing to move along. He doesn't want to see this thing drag out. So if you can find places for efficiencies, let's not be redundant. Yeah. If this is unnecessary testimony, let's move on. I imagine you've run into that situation as well. You want to sometimes hear from different perspectives and different people who saw it, but if they're telling you the same thing, maybe we can move on, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate Judge Adelman making that comment, kind of keeping things moving along, because as lawyers, we like to talk a lot, and sometimes we don't realize how much talking we're doing, and sometimes we're in the guise of trying to be thorough. We may be asking a lot of repetitive questions, so I appreciate that Judge Adelman reminded the government that, hey, we've kind of been through this already. You're going to lose your audience. Let's keep things moving along.
As the government lays out its case, I think the last day, basically, once witness testimony started, has been interesting, I'm sure from your perspective as a defense attorney, to see how Hannah Dugan's legal team starts to chip away at those different witnesses, at the credibility, the authority of these members of different law enforcement groups. So what have you noted from the way that Jason Luzak and other attorneys for Judge Dugan have begun their cross-examination of these different witnesses?
Yeah, they haven't really gotten into the meat and potatoes of what happened in the courtroom yet. And I think those witnesses are going to be actually more compelling, in all honesty, more interesting. These are still kind of foundational witnesses that we're dealing with. But I think what they're doing is they're kind of setting up a two-pronged defense. One prong is just basically setting up the fact that she, meaning Judge Dugan, was not intending to actually obstruct these officers, was not intending to hide Mr. Flores Ruiz. That's one prong, that's one angle that I think the defense is starting to set up through their questioning. But I also think that's starting to set up this second prong, which is the fact that these agents weren't actually obstructed. And by virtue of the fact that they had an opportunity to take down or to arrest Mr. Flores Ruiz right there in the hallway of the 6th floor of the courthouse, yet they chose not to do that. And so that begs the question, did Judge Dugan's actions that day actually obstruct these agents in doing what they came there to do?
Well, I do wonder about this, too, because the government has made a point of saying, whether or not something ultimately happened doesn't mean you didn't try, doesn't mean that you didn't try and fail. And I do wonder, in a case like this, will Hannah Dugan, the defense doesn't have the burden, but yet there does seem to be this lingering question, okay, if you weren't trying to obstruct, then why'd you send him out the back door? Will they have to answer that question? Because unless Hannah Dugan takes the stand, you can't really ask her that question.
Yeah, this is one of these cases where I think it's going to be hard for Judge Dugan to present a strong defense in the case without her getting on the stand and testifying. The hardest part to overcome in this entire case from a defense perspective, in my opinion, with the limited knowledge I have of the facts, they have all of the discovery and the reports and all that, is why did Judge Dugan direct or tell Mr. Flores Ruiz and his attorney to go out that side door? Why not just have him go through the front door? And that seemed to be the most damning fact. And there could be a legitimate reason as to why she did that, but it needs some explanation. And I think that the only person that can really thoroughly and explain why she did that and to the satisfaction of a jury is Judge Dugan. And so I think that at some point in time, my gut feeling is that Judge Dugan is going to have to take the stand to explain why she did what she did.
Interesting.